Introduce yourself, please.
Charles Butts. Most people call me Charlie.
Mr. Butts, tell us a little bit, maybe where you were born and raised, how you got to law school, why you became a lawyer, and a little bit about your early career as a lawyer. And then ultimately, of course, you wound up for maybe the last 40 years here in San Antonio.
Well, I was born and raised in Wichita Falls, got out of high school there, went to Texas Tech for 3 years studying to be a chemical engineer. I got into higher mathematics and realized if I designed a plant, it'd blow up because of my mathematics, so I went to law school. Went to law school in the summer of '41 in the University of Texas. The reason that I became a lawyer, I suppose, is because of a trip to civics class. We went to several of the courts, including federal court, and there was an old judge there that sentenced a doctor who had gotten his records of morphine all mixed up because his wife was dying of cancer. It offended me the way he treated that doctor and what he got, sent him off to the pen, and there were other factors in connection with that. But in 1936, Texas governor's race, Wichita Falls, interestingly enough, had 4 lawyers. All of them were the gubernatorial candidates. Jimmy Allred, who later became governor, Orville Bullington, the father of the Republican Party, Tom Hunter, a Democrat, and Charles McDonald, a Democrat. Jimmy Allred won, was a friend of my dad's in the Optimist Club, and he had been the district attorney in Wichita Falls. There were many other lawyers that I knew, and I had gone to the balconies of the courthouse, which had a balcony much like the Atticus Finch balcony in To Kill a Mockingbird. And I used to watch people try cases and fascinated by that, and so I was pretty shy. I never had done any public speaking, and I mumbled, and I'm probably mumbling right now as a matter of fact, but I took some public speaking, and then the war came on in 1942. I went away to the Air Force, went overseas with B-17 Bomber Squadron. I was the top kick there, the first sergeant there, and stayed over there nearly 4 years and came back. Entered law school after working in a warehouse, getting ready to go to law school. I went to law school in the fall of '46. Got my law degree May 10th, 1949, a while ago. And my first job was with a law firm named Allen Locke & Coolrod. And during the course of the time I was with them, well, they defended a gentleman who had a funeral home for embalming people with plain water instead of the proper fluid, and so they defended him, and he was acquitted. And he came in one day. He was the head of one of the elements of the Shrine of Texas, and he brought the program in, and across here at the top was one day's program, here's another day's program, and his picture in his regal robes in the middle, and down below was a scroll. It said, Allen Locke & Coolrod, Lawyers Deluxe, no case too large or small, our best is none too good. Well, that brought down the house, and those were circulated around town. The bar didn't do anything to them because they hadn't solicited that advertising, but that was a lot of fun. Then I had a call from Phil Coolrod one day that John Watts out in Odessa had succeeded Mel Belli to the old NACA, which was the prelude to the American Trial Lawyers, and that he needed a lawyer. So I went out there, and he offered me a job and a salary I couldn't refuse, so we moved to Odessa. I stayed in Odessa for quite a while and tried a case against a fine insurance defense lawyer named Jim Little over in Big Spring, and tried several cases with Jim, but frankly, insurance defense wasn't my cup of tea. I'm really basically a people's lawyer. I've always been for the downtrodden and oppressed, and I thought, well, that's something I don't want to do. Well, I tried a case against an oil company in the Monahans after I was gone to Big Spring, and I won it. I put this drilling company in receivership, and one of my opponents was John Markey, M-A-R-C-H-I, from Helena, Montana. He'd been the lawyer for the Oil and Gas Commission there, and he called me one day and said, "Charlie, I want to open an office in Billings. Why don't you move to Montana?" I said, "Holy mackerel, I never thought of going to Montana to visit, let alone practice law there." But anyway, I had a client that had 49 uranium claims, 49 uranium claims out of South Pass City, Wyoming. F.H. McGinnis was his name. He and I drove up there, and I found that those claims, the work on them had been abandoned, but we salvaged them and got him back on track on those claims. And while I was that close to Montana, well, I flew up to Billings, met John, and the long story was we opened an office, and I got my license in Montana in November of '57, I believe, either November of '57, and I practiced up there for several years and enjoyed it, mostly oil and gas and some criminal. Then while I was up there, I had a big case against Carter Oil Company, and I offered to settle it with a lawyer named Cale Crowley. And meantime, John Watson sent me the case, and he was going to make a talk on closing argument at Galveston. And I sent him a letter telling him, "Well, I'm sure looking forward to you getting here so we can try this case, and yeah, we'll all be ready." So he said, "Well, I'm going to be in Galveston, and when I get through there, I'll fly to Billings." Well, I sent a copy of my letter to Cale Crowley, and much to my surprise, a few days later, he called me and said, "Charles, I'll pay you that money you want." I said, "My Lord, what happened?" He said, "Well, I flew to Galveston, and I heard John Watts make his talk on closing argument and tell me, man, I don't want him coming up here and setting some kind of new precedence in our law." And that kind of floored me. And so he paid us. We settled that case, settled it on his having heard John make an argument. Well, after Big Spring and Montana, I later moved back down to Texas. And Jack Hightower ran for Congress, and I was his campaign manager, and we ultimately got him elected. And when that was over with, that was about 1961, 62, Stan Kirk, who was the DA, and a fine DA, later a judge, called me one day, and he said, "Look, you don't have a lot of political baggage, and I need you very badly to help me investigate the sheriff." He had been writing phony receipts, claiming to be transporting people back and forth to prison and to jail. He used those phony receipts and was caught claiming he had been in one place. He claimed he had been at the Corral Motel in Jasper, Texas. And it turned out in the course of his trial that Ward Markley, who was a law student friend of mine, was the county attorney in Jasper, and I called Ward and I said, "I need you for a witness." So the sheriff got on the stand, testified about the having been in the motel, and described it and said there was a little lariat around the sign, Corral Motel. And yeah, he remembered very well. Well, I put Ward on the stand after he had testified, and I said, "You know anything about the Corral Motel in Jasper?" "Oh, yeah, I sure do." "Well, tell me about it." I said, "Well, The only thing there is a sign. Said they started the motel and ran out of money, and they've got this sign that's got this lariat all around it. It says Corral Motel. I said, well, do they have any tents they could rent or anything at all? No, they haven't built it yet. Well, that kind of blew the sheriff out of the water. Well, I thought if we can try, which we did, and send to the pen the sheriff, who at the time was the president of the Texas Peace Officers Association, maybe I can prosecute. I never had done any prosecution, so I stayed there for a while, prosecuted several other cases, one of which was a blabbermouth that had molested a little boy, and I put the britches on him, sent him off the pen. Then I was very active in the state bar criminal law section. I was on the nominating committee with Judge Archie Brown in 66 and 67, and had a Dallas Bar Convention in 66, so we attended, and Judge Brown told me, he said, you know, Jim Barlow, and I said, no, I heard him make a talk when the new criminal procedure code came in. I thought, but I don't know him, so he got a hold of Jim, and Jim came over, and we had some coffee and chewed the fat, and he told me he was having some serious problems with a particular prosecutor, and Judge Denise Saman had just become a judge, and he wasn't getting along with the prosecutor and vice versa. Well, I knew Judge Saman. I knew I could get along with him because I was a good friend of his. So, lo and behold, we moved to San Antonio and prosecuted many cases before Judge Saman, and one of the best men I ever knew. And so then Ted Butler came aboard after Jim Barlow went on the bench, and Ted made me first assistant, which I appreciated, and tried several cases. Tried the Thief of Baghdad, which some people will remember. And I want to change the venue to Victoria. And I want to give due credit to Eddie Gannon, defense lawyer that was appointed to represent him. Judge Joe Kelly tried that case, and in the course of we were seeking the death penalty. And in the course of that case and his jury argument, Eddie, who had a wonderful personality, he told the jury, he said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he said, you know, I said, I was born and raised here in Victoria, and we've got this little gazebo out in front of the courthouse, and every day I bring a sack lunch, and I sit out there and wave to the people as they go by, and they say, hey, there's old Eddie Gannon. Please don't give my client the death penalty. Because then they'll drive by and say, there's that poor Eddie Gannon that we killed his client. And the jury laughed, and I laughed, and he got life. One of the most nearly unique arguments I believe I ever heard. Well, that's sort of a rendition of things, and Bill White was my law partner in the trial of the cases in the DA's office. Well, after that, Mike Rizek, bless old Mike came along, and I'd done him some favors. He got where he wouldn't come to anybody but me, and so he said, I want you to come over here with me. And I said, man, that got me a good job. I'm first assistant here in the DA's office. Well, I don't care. I said, I want you to come over with me. Well, Ted Butler had gone to Detroit or something for some kind of a seminar. Lo and behold, Mike came in, and he had a stack of announcements at least that high that he had printed, unbeknownst to me. Mike Rizek and Charles D. Butts and Chapman Bird take pleasure in announcing the formation of the partnership of Rizek, Butts, and Bird. When Ted Butler got home, he nearly had a fit. I told him, I said, man, I didn't have anything to do with that. So anyway, I stayed on until I tried the Thief of Baghdad down there in Victoria and went with old Mike. He was a good friend of mine, but he was one of a kind. I was in the library preparing a case on uninsured motorists against one of the best lawyers around, Damon Ball. I didn't know anything about uninsured motorists. It didn't have anything to do with prosecution of cases, you know. Well, I was in the library and old Mike came by. He'd go by, he'd come back again. Finally, after about an hour, he came in and said, "When are you going to go to work, Charlie?" I said, "Man, you'd be surprised what you can find in these law books." He said, "I'm only interested in receipt books." But he was a great friend of mine. So then I had known Fred Saman. I'd been pallbearer at Judge Saman's funeral, and that really hit me. He was such a fine man. And so I talked to Fred, and Fred said, "Why don't you come over here? I got some space." And I did, and wonderful. Then Shirley when we came here, she got a job with David Evans. David Evans is really one of the saviors of TCDLA. He and Georgia Kett. I'll talk about that momentarily in a minute. So anyway, Shirley Office with us too, and one day Fred had a run-in with one of the women judges, and he came back storming. Shirley was officing with us at the time, and he stormed. He blankety-blank women judges said they ought to be home having babies and cooking us fellas, and he went round and round and round. Said, so Lionel Goodstein, a real gentleman, Fred, stop. Shirley's in there. Fred said, "Hell, she's an old woman. She's a lawyer." And I'll never forget that. So Shirley came out and said, "Thank you. Why don't you just say I'm a woman lawyer, or better still, just say I'm a lawyer?" Well, that was Fred Saman. We tried a lot of cases together. I never will forget a murder case we tried down in Houston. A fellow moved in on a woman and her teenage boy, and he ran the boy off with a golf club. And while he was trying to do it, the mother came in and shot him and killed him. So we defended her for murder. Well, when the man got shot, there was a police photograph, showed him still holding a golf club, lying more or less back with this goofy smirk on his face. I won't try to do it because I look goofy enough on TV anyway, I'm sure. So, but he had this weird smirk on his face and holding this golf club. Well, Fred Saman, if you didn't know him, and I'm sure a lot of you know him, picked up that golf club in his jury yard. And he pranced in front of that jury with this goofy smirk on his face. Anyway, we got a conviction. I'll never forget Fred with that smirk on his face. So then, that's pretty well how things came along, and then I prosecuted so many cases I can't remember, and then after I left the DA's office and left Mike, I was with Fred for about 14 years before he passed away. And Shirley was with us, and then Shirley was appointed to the Court of Appeals as the first woman on that court by Governor Clements. She was a Democrat, still is a Democrat, and always will be a Democrat, I suppose. And then she was elected in '82, re-elected, and retired in '95, I guess it was. That's kind of a long-winded rendition to what time it is. What else have you got on your mind, Mark?
You've tried so many memorable cases, and I want you talked about a few of them, and if you just had to think of one case that was interesting to talk about, which one comes to mind, if it's possible to even say one case?
Well, on the defense side, Alvin Johnson was a deputy sheriff, and he was accused of molesting a little girl in a motel. And I tried that in front of Judge Tom Rickoff. The motel was somewhat of a notorious one. I don't believe it'd be appropriate to name it, but it's pretty well known by those who know that kind of motel. The owner of the motel was the new owner, the wife, was on the stand, and she testified, yeah, that's the one, Alvin Johnson. He's the one that I checked into that motel, and I have no doubt about it. So I said, well, how do you know it was him? It's been a while, hasn't it? She said, yes, but I know that's him because of his driver's license. So I said, so you always check the driver's license? Yes, I do. And so you're basing that really on the fact that you saw his driver's license. That's right. No question about it, no. I couldn't help but say, by the way, ma'am, what do you all charge by the hour? That met the reputation of the motel. She, oh God, she poor woman, she got so mad. She started in on me, and so I said, well, that's all. Well, on the way back to the council table, how am I going to do something? So I had my driver's license that I had showed her. And on the way back, lo and behold, it accidentally fell out of my hand on the floor, halfway between the witness stand and the council table. I just ignored it. The bailiff couldn't stand it. He got up, picked up the driver's license, and walked over to me and said, Mr. Bush said, you dropped your driver's license. I said, thank God I didn't drop it in front of that motel. I might have been registered there too. Rickoff still talks about that case. That was one, and we got an acquittal. That was one case. You know, the Chicago 7 case was an interesting case where a lawyer has a duty to protect his client from oppression from the judge or the prosecution or whoever. Well, I was defending a young man for wiretapping. Make a long story short, he had crawled under a house and tapped the wire and nearly got electrocuted so he could listen to his estranged girlfriend on the phone that he hooked up. Well, there was a picture of a little boy that she had had from my client, by my client. Looked just like it. So I marked it as an exhibit. On cross-examination, I said, have you ever seen this little boy? She went berserk. She said, where'd you get that picture? I said, that's my little boy, but that's not from him. So I said, I didn't mean to do it. I was going over toward the court reporter to have it introduced. And when I did, the jury saw it. The judge, federal court, he flat flipped his lid. He shook his finger at me. You marked that and you introduced it. I said, well, Your Honor, I was going to say I don't mind to be out of order in that claim, but all I could get out of there was I don't. Don't you argue with me. Shook his finger at me. You going to behave in this court? I said, well, Your Honor, I am. I've been practicing a long time. I don't mistreat judges. Well, you may have been practicing a long time, but you shut up. Use those words. I said, even if there's something germane to my case, shut up, shut up. I said, I take exception to the court's shouting at me in front of this jury to the detriment of my client. Well, there you go. You don't know anything about criminal law. You don't have to, about federal law, so you don't have to say, take my exception. That's how much you know about federal law. I said, that'd be a matter of opinion, Your Honor. Yeah, there you go again. You're arguing with me. Take him away. And I had the marshal put me in jail. So as I was leaving the courtroom, I was stumbling for words. I said, I give notice of appeal, Your Honor. Well, you may appeal, but you're going to jail right now. So I did. I got to jail, and all the marshals were all friends of mine. I took and I banged on the jail door. I said, it's noontime. I demand that be fed. So they brought me a hamburger. And when about 2 o'clock came, he called and sent word, was I ready to behave? I said, I think that's a matter of mutual responsibility. And that's all I dared to say. So I went back and we tried the case, finished it. Well, I hired Shirley. I was smart enough to hire Shirley to appeal my case, appeal it to the Fifth Circuit, and reversed him. The prosecution took the position that since I'd served over 2 hours in jail, they couldn't give it back to me. That the point was moot. The point was moot, and the opinion of the appellate court reversing it said they might not give me my time, but they could restore my reputation. Well, in order to demonstrate what had been said, they just footnoted the judge's remarks verbatim. One might think that would cause enmity between a lawyer and a judge, but it didn't. I was elected president of the San Antonio Bar, and both of those judges, Judge Spears and the other one, they took senior status. And one day after, and we had a ceremony for them at the hotel, and the picture on the front page of the paper showed me shaking hands with the other two together. So I had a call from this judge and said, Marshall and I want to come to your office. Fine, I'd be glad to see you. What in the world they want to see me for? But to show you the stature and the magnitude of the fine man that he was, when he came, he had that picture on the front page laminated on a plaque. And he wrote the site up in the left-hand corner of the case. And he wrote, "You taught me patience." And we laughed, had a cup of coffee, and he was one of my best friends from then on. And I just have a very strong feeling about the lawyer's respect for the law, lawyer's respect for judges, respect for opposing counsel, respect for the courtroom, and that to me demonstrated the real mark of a man. He was just having a bad time. In fact, the matter is, I tried a drug case over in Del Rio in front of him. He got an acquittal. And that was not very long after I had reversed him. And he called me and said, "Mr. Budd said the court wants to see you in chambers." I said, "My Lord, what have I done now?" Well, he shook his hand, shook my hand, and said, "I want to compliment you on being elected president of the San Antonio Bar. And I followed your career ever since we had that bad day, and I'm glad to be your friend," or words to that effect. And he was a good man. Another case that I had, the prosecution, I suppose one of my most celebrated prosecutions was when I was in Fort Worth. Prosecuted the notorious killer Kenneth Allen McDuff. He had killed a girl and 2 little boys and raped the girl. Terrible case. It's known as the broomstick murder. He was caught, arrested, became my lot to be the lead prosecutor in the case, and we tried and got him convicted. Death penalty. Furman v. Georgia changed that. He was no, not Furman v. Georgia. By then I'm not too sure about the sequence there. In any event, he got the death penalty, and later was convicted after he was paroled. He killed 3 or 4 other people, and finally he was paroled and caught again by the feds and convicted and executed ultimately. And I testified in 2 of those ultimate trials. I noticed here on a little thing that I got from the TCDLA email about mistakes that lawyers make.
Yes.
A mistake was made in that case by the defense counsel. He opened a door that you could drive a Mack truck through. He had Alan McDuff on the stand. He said, "Now, Alan, you've been a good boy, haven't you, for some time?" "Yes, I have." "Well, down there in Rosebud, your hometown, well, you were in, quote, a little bit of trouble, weren't you?" "Yes, I was. And you paid your debt to society, and you've been a good boy ever since, and you didn't do this crime." "You know, I didn't." Well, they didn't know that I'd talked to the sheriff in Rosebud, and I had a list of 12, I think it was 12 arrests he'd had shortly before he committed this terrible crime, and he was paroled. I understand his mama paid some money to somebody down there, and so I asked the court, Byron Matthews, who incidentally is a member of our Hall of Fame, I said, "Your Honor, it's pretty close to lunch now. May we recess?" That was when he asked him. "Yes, you may." So after lunch, I said, "Now, Alan, you were in a little bit of trouble, weren't you?" "Yeah, I was. In a little bit of trouble." I said, "What's your description of little bit?" "Is an arrest for raping a girl and using deep heat or something other for lubrication. Is a little bit of trouble a robbery and stealing some jewelry. Is a little bit of trouble this, a little bit of trouble that, a little bit of trouble that." And he got mad. The prosecutor, the defense counsel was on and on, up and up and up, saying, well, he wasn't convicted of those. And of course, the judge overruled him, and the jury got the point that a little bit of trouble was not quite what he'd had. Interesting about a jury, when that case was over, the foreman said to me, "You know, I don't know whether you noticed it or not, but we noticed that when he was on the witness stand, he would grab his knuckle on his left hand of his index finger. When you would have him in a corner, he'd twist that thing like he's taking off a bottle cap. Twist it and twist it and twist it." And they could see in the entranceway was toward the jury where they get into the witness box, so half of them could see what he was doing. But he said, then when you back off and let him ease up, you relax. And he said, we got to where we'd watch it for when he'd twist that knuckle. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And one final thing, I suppose, that of the cases I've had, I guess it's all right to use the name of Charles County. The Buffington case was a terrible case around here where a man hired some fellows to kill his wife while he was away on vacation and went to the racetrack. And my client, County, did not commit the crime, but he was present. The Buffington and his cohort were not at large, but they didn't have anything really on them. So the prosecutor called me and he said, if Charles County will cooperate and help us with these two guys, I will not seek the death penalty. The state will not seek the death penalty. I said, well, I'm not going to plead him. I'm going to try no matter what you do. So we went into his office, put a tape recorder on his desk. A lawyer who's now deceased was there, and he told me sometime before he died that he remembered it. Put all that on tape. Caught those other two, and they were tried. I was in bed with the flu, listened to the radio, and it comes over the radio, the state had rested. Never did call my client. So I called the prosecutor and I said, hey, what's going on? My client was testified, and that was our agreement. And he said, we didn't have any agreement. I'm going to fry him. Oh, man. I reminded him, no. I said, you were mistaken. We didn't have that agreement. Well, to make a long story short, no one would agree to it that I had. I tried him on change of venue in Brownsville. He got the death penalty. Motion after motion after motion about that, going back on the word. Tried him again in Brownsville on another change of venue, and he got the death penalty, and I reversed that. By that time, the courts and everyone would begin to think I was telling the truth. So I remembered that Sam Bashir and a couple of other lawyers had a bond hearing for Buffington. And that my client had testified in that bond hearing. And that I was asked when I was on the stand, you have a plea deal, you have a plea bargain with him. No, don't. Kept on. I said, unless you're talking about the agreement with the state not to seek the death penalty. I found that record, and I introduced that, and Pat Priest had made a ruling in the case, and I've got a certification that said the court found that Charles Butts is a credible lawyer. Anyway, that was fun. So I tried him again. The Court of Criminal Appeals ordered the state not to seek the death penalty again. I tried him before Judge Priest again. He got life. Reversed that. All three of those reversals was on the court's charge. Got life. Reversed that. Bill Harris. I'll use Bill Harris's name because he's a credible man. He called me and he said, hey, let's get rid of this case. I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I'll let him out for time served. So he did. That man served 17 years on death row. I served 19 years as a court-appointed lawyer in that case, and that case could have been resolved at least, no more at least, in probably 2 years would have been all the time it took to get it out of the way in the first place. The moral of that story spotlights one of my absolute feelings about the law, about lawyers, and that is your word should be good. If it's not, it doesn't have to be in writing if your word's no good. You asked, I heard here somewhere on this, that how has the law changed since you became a lawyer? Whew. I started practicing with a second-hand Royal typewriter and carbon paper and a secretary that took shorthand. But what has happened so much in the practice of law is avalanche of paperwork. When they invented the computer and ProDoc and all these other things, the amount of paperwork just escalated. And another thing, you know, people say when you get a little older, why things aren't now like what they used to be. But I guarantee you, when I started practicing law, and for many years, there was a camaraderie amongst lawyers, defense and prosecution, that's just not here now. I don't know what it is. The adversary, in all due respect to the current administration and the DA's office, they kind of look on the criminal defense lawyer as kind of part of civic criminal, just kind of like you're kind of part of the offense, you know, and that distresses me. A lawyer should respect opposing counsel and vice versa. Should give due respect to the court. By the same token, don't let the court run over your client. Certainly don't let him kill him over your shoulder. The discovery process is something that, you know, should be adhered to. It's not hard for a prosecutor to know what they're supposed to offer and not offer by way of discovery. I don't think some police departments even know how to spell Miranda, let alone apply it. How the laws change, the law of search and seizure has drastically changed. So many things, but I still love the law. I've been asked why have I not burned out? Well, I think one reason I haven't burned down in the law is I love the law, I love the courts, I love my brother lawyers, I love reading the law, and I'm blessed with having a wife that's, I think, the best lawyer I ever knew. And we talked about as much law as we do politics or the flood or whatever. Tony Nicholas, bless his heart, he's now going to be the member of the Texas Hall of Fame, TCDLA Hall of Fame. He told a friend of mine several years ago, you know, I wish I'd like old Charlie and Shirley said they go home in the afternoon, sit down and talk the law and have a glass of champagne. Well, we don't quite have the champagne, but we have a little white wine occasionally. The question was put to me, what suggestion would I have for someone wanting to be in criminal law, be in criminal defense? First of all, I'd say learn how to be a good public speaker. I'd say, for goodness sakes, learn computers. Buy ProDoc. Remember that a lawyer is a lawyer is a lawyer. And you be a lawyer, be the best you can, be prepared, treat your opponent with respect, expect the same, and if they don't, make them wish they had. I think it would be good for a young lawyer, if they can, to go into a district attorney's office of maybe the size of Wichita Falls or some town of 25 to 50,000, where you have a small staff, 3 or 4 lawyers. You handle a grand jury, you handle an investigation to some extent, right off the bat you start learning how to try a case. By contrast with going into a big metropolitan office where you work through these little steps and ultimately get to try a case. But I think just jumping in and learning how to try a case is best. And I think I know in the Wichita Falls we had 3 prosecutors beside the DA. And there's other towns like Kerrville's got a couple of them. Junkson's got a couple of them. Bernie's got a couple of them. Seguin. All of these towns that are up to about 50,000 that have maybe 3 or 4 prosecutors, and you can do that. I think that would be a good proving ground for a man that wants to be a criminal defense lawyer. For one thing, you learn a little bit about what the other side attitude is when you get into defense, and you should also do like I did. If you haven't got a case to try, go watch one try. Watch someone that's an expert like you, Mark, like Jerry Goldstein, like so many others, like Rick Hagan from Denton, and watch them how they try the case. Clyde Fillmore was the best DA I ever saw in Wichita Falls. I used to watch him try the Sauchet case, S-A-C-H-U-I, something like that. It was one that was tried when I was just a fledgling lawyer. A man killed an inmate out at the state hospital in Wichita Falls, and put him on a gurney and marched ahead of it with a broom, like it was a baton of a band, singing, "Here comes the bride. Here comes the bride," with this poor guy on a gurney and a gurney and pushing behind him down the hall of this thing. I can see and hear Clyde Fillmore now with that broom, marching up and down in front of that jury singing, "Here comes the bride," bouncing that thing. Powerful lawyer. I watched several of them. Bill Ballard, trying a DWI case. Back when they didn't have the breath test, it was all blood tests. This chemist handed this chemist this lab this vial of blood in it. He said, "Now you dropped that on the floor of the lab and scooped it up and got cleaning fluid in it and everything else like that. Now this is not the original vial, is it?" It is too. So the guy got pretty indignant, and Bill said, "Well, you've never made a mistake." "No, I've never made a mistake." So Bill had this vial, and he handed it to this guy, and I was standing up in the Attica Sphinx balcony. He said, "Well, I'm sure glad that you've never made a mistake. Here, take this back." And I could see his face do that when he handed it to him. And that guy dropped that on the floor and it went splunk right in front of the witness chair. And he looked down and the jury just went up. They laughed. Bill turned in a haughty way and said, "Well, everyone's entitled to one mistake." I watch those trials, and golly, I try to get their style, how they cross-examine, their style, their manner, and I talk to many of them. I've got to go to several old lawyers. Dan Boone was one. I went, not the Dan Boone, but Dan Boone of Wichita Falls. I went and talked to him many times. Many times. He was died in the Willem Baptist. Told me a lot of things about how to conduct myself in the law, in the courtroom. And I've watched him many times. Many times. What else
Can you tell us a
got?
minute about the early days of TCDLA? You ran it from the beginning. Tell us a minute.
Yeah. The State Bar criminal law section, we would alternate every year. The prosecution would handle it 1 year, defense attorneys another year. And the defense counsel, we really didn't have a voice. It was a nice thing, but we really didn't do anything on behalf of defense. A bunch of us got together, and Frank Maloney, of course, was the head man to begin with, so we formed Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers. Had our first meeting in the Holiday Inn just off of the road, Mockingbird Road, into a field. Warren Burnett was a member of that, and right off the bat, people started talking about, well, we need to have categories of membership. Pay so much, or this category, pay so much, this here. Well, Warren spoke up in that wonderful voice of his and objected. He said, this is an association for criminal defense lawyers, and we don't have categories, but later we did, and that's fine. So after we were formed, we started having skills courses, and they were a rather simplified little course where you learned how to do some paperwork, and we went all over the state. I went to Amarillo, I went to Odessa, I went to Wichita Falls, even to Longview, everywhere, putting on these little short skills courses. We needed membership. So what we would do, a bunch of us would get together and we'd say, well, we're going to go to Houston, and we're going to go here, we're going to go there. Two of the most active that we had was David Evans and George Luquette. We'd go to offices all over. We'd walk in, or David would walk in, and he was very forceful. He'd walk in and said, we want you to join TCDLA, and he had a way of flipping his hand and said, give me a check. Give me a check. He'd get it every time. Well, we built up the organization. Charlie McDonald was another one that deserves full recognition by this association. He's kind of slowed down lately, and others. Tony Freelo was with us. Weldon Holcomb, what a tremendous asset. That guy with a big hat. I never will forget that big hat. So we would do this and get membership going. And then lo and behold, during one particular lawyer's administration, it developed that we were broke. We flat were broke. Where the money went and how it went and who did or didn't do what is immaterial, but we were broke. George Luquette and David Evans almost single-handedly got together and they helped resurrect this association. And they should have had due credit for, I'd say, being the savior of the TCDLA. Well, they commandeered me and Weldon and the rest of us to go around and get some more membership, which we did. The project was being formed, and Bob Jones, I believe it was on active duty, and he took leave to come back to vote on the project. And then that was formed, and then of course that's grown tremendously ever since that time, and it's a great thing. And the initial idea of Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers was to give the defense lawyer a voice, and I think the magazine is well named. And the association is the finest association of lawyers I've ever been in. Absolutely. And I'm proud of our local association. We're doing well. There's so many other things about the early days, but I think one of the main early day deals was getting together, getting all that membership, and getting him going. Of course, I miss the old guys. I miss Tony Freeload, Charlie McDonald. And by the way, Charlie McDonald signed the mortgage for our original building, and he's pretty well out of the practice now. And I hope that somehow or other he's given some sort of a recognition for his contribution to this association. He lives on the lake somewhere down around Waco, I forget now just where. David Evans and George Luquette, I don't know what recognition they've had. Charlie McDonald's another one. I'd say those three haven't received the accolades that they really entitled to. But I want to say in closing that without this association, the criminal defense bar would be in a real drought of knowledge. Just absolutely is the best criminal defense outfit in the United States, in my opinion. More so than the national, in my opinion. So that's about it. I want to give due credit to Shirley, my wife. Everybody knows was active in this association, wrote many articles early on about it, and retired from the Court of Appeals in 1995. And we've been doing a little traveling ever since then. That's it.